give and lend to others without expecting payment back. Jesus is pointing out something, obviously, that, well, wouldn't sit well with most financial consultants. For certainly banks do not do that, we know. In fact, you don't even get the same amount back when you borrow from a bank. No, they tax you on more, and you get more and more taxed the longer you take to pay it off. But Jesus is not talking about finances. He's talking about understanding how to live as a child of God. In our first reading, we hear how David, anointed after Saul was anointed king, and that David would become the king, is being sought by Saul and his army and his general Abner. They have gone down to the desert of Ziph, where David is thought to be hiding. So he brings down his troops, and in the midst of the night they fall asleep. And even though they have barricades up, David and his associate stumble upon Saul sleeping face down with his sword in the ground next to him. His advisor says, "Let me grab the spear, and in one thrust, I will take him out." But David realizes that the power he receives isn't his own, but comes from God. And he considers, if I have Saul's life taken from him, so might mine be taken from me. For he was anointed, and then I was anointed. So no, he grabs the spear and the water and proceeds to the other side of the wadi, big area in the ground. He's on one side, the others are camped in the other, and David screams out to anyone who might hear, hopefully Abner, and he says, "I have here the sword of Saul, the spear of Saul." And he's almost taunting Abner, the general of Saul, and he's trying to figure out who it is. But Saul recognizes David's voice and says, "Obviously, you had the time and the ability to take my life. You chose not to. You chose to spare me. I do admit," and this is what Saul says, it's not in that reading, but in between, he says, "I admit I was wrong in seeking your life. And since you saved mine, I will no longer seek yours." So David says, "Have one of your attendants come and receive back your spear, the symbol of his power." And he says, "May no one take the life of the anointed one." It is a tribute that David understands that God is the one who gives the power to rule. And when he practices true justice along those lines, recognizing the importance of Saul and who Saul is for others, it may indeed be reciprocated. In fact, later on in that same book of Samuel, David himself does what God does not want, and he too seeks forgiveness. And it's something we need to appreciate and understand, that God's mercy is what we're called to expand upon, what we're called to be part of. That's why at the beginning of Mass, we all recognize, even though each and every one of us at our baptism were baptized priest, prophet, and king, that we're called to bring God's mercy and forgiveness and act in true justice and give God and each person their due. It is something we need to appreciate, that power comes from God. It's funny because in teaching the kids who are about to receive their first penance this coming Saturday, I talked to them about the sacrament. I said to them, when you go to the sacrament of penance, you're not going there to be punished. You're not there just to make up for what you've done wrong. It's not just about reparation and getting even. No, you go there asking for a blessing, the power of God to bring about unity instead of division, to bring about forgiveness instead of hate. And I told the children, you will have this power in your family if you practice and exercise it. It's something that we need to appreciate and teach our children. Not to create division, not to cancel out, not to do any of the crazy things that are going on in our world. Jesus appears on the scene, and like David, whoever has ears, listen to this. You should love your enemies. You should give what you have for others. You should understand the gifts that you give will be given back to you. The whole reciprocation that is there is meant for us to understand. And I've said before, and I said last week, even in the presentation of the gifts represent the work of people's hands, the work of, the labor to make bread from wheat, and which God gave us, and then to make wine from grapes. It takes human labor to make it happen. And that gift of human labor and the gift of the people are brought forward, and God perfects it. Not only does he perfect it, but he gives it back to us anew. He forgives us. He restores us, just as we hear about Adam being restored into a child of God. So too are we. We are transformed whenever we're willing to. As a child of God, we go through the Eucharist prayer, we stand up, we dare to say we're children of God, just practicing forgiveness as God taught. We look past the faults of others and offer them the sign of peace and wish them everlasting life. We give another their due. We give them that much more. Even if we don't like them, it's something we're called to do, just as David did, and just as Christ did, who, while being crucified, especially in Luke's gospel, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And then the thief that was being also crucified with him, he accepts him into his kingdom. Are we really willing to forgive everyone? Or do we harbor grudges in our family? Do we no longer talk to anyone because we got in an argument? Do we cancel people out, like so many in our media? Do we create division, or do we seek unity? Do we truly act as children of God and return to God what is God's, and to others what we would like to have returned to us. Don't underestimate. Try to appreciate. There's crazy things going on in our world. You know about, what we hear as insurrections and actual, rumors of war, where people's lives will be lost. Has anyone here prayed for Putin? Has anyone taken the time to think about the animosity between China and the United States? Has anyone taken the time to pray for Xi? Or better yet, Biden? We need to appreciate that God has entrusted us this power to be able to forgive, a power to allow God to change the minds and hearts of those who have difficulty hearing him. But nevertheless, as we said and asked at the beginning of our service, beginning of Mass, we ask not once, not twice, but 3 times for his mercy. Allow yourselves to have God work within your minds and hearts so that you can bring about a transformation in all people from being earthly to being spiritual. Movement from being an earthly person to a child of God. For our reward, indeed, will be great. Not just here on earth, but more importantly, eternal in heaven.